Welcome, everybody, to yet another episode of Strife's Sanctum. I'm your host, Citizen Strife, and today we're going to be taking a trip down Tales Lane. Because not only are we talking about Berseria, but we're going to continue discussing Tales of Arise and how it continues to be my favorite Tales game thus far. So this was an episode I was going to do with a guest known as Captain Dark, and turns out both technology and scheduling issues kept that being a problem. My hope is that I get something known as a mod mic to put on a headset, and it ends up getting rid of the issues that we had technology-wise, and then eventually maybe we can talk about Tales of Arise or some other games. But as far as Tales of Arise goes, I'm about, I'd say, halfway through the game, and I've gotten every character, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It has some quirks to it, mainly just how it streamlines the entire experience. You're not in this game expecting a 50 to 70 hour epic. You're in it to do what you do and get gone, almost like the main character Shion. And I enjoy that a lot. I enjoy, that old PS1 mantra where it's a big and expansive looking game, but when Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 9, they didn't take all that long. They took 30, 35 hours. It wasn't until, Final Fantasy 13 and later on, or even Final Fantasy 12, I guess, because Final Fantasy 10, you had a lot of side quest stuff at the ends of games, right? But Tales of Arise put you in the thing, get you doing the thing, and yeah, you have some side quests that open up as things go, and you could spend as much time as you want on them, but you're always going to be pointed in a direction that you want to go. So it's a very streamlined experience. It's not going to give you too much guesswork unless it's a puzzle-related quest, and there's not many of those. It's mostly just fetch quests here and there, but that's also a good thing because they're trying to get you to do the story first, and it helps that the story, much like the game we're talking about today, is all about the characters and what their struggle is. I think Berseria has a much more character focus on it, but I think both share similarities in the sense that their characters are grounded and they're reasonable, and they don't really go out of their way to sound stupid. There's not a lot of comedy to be had in either game, right? And comedy in the sense of, okay, it's more of a levity based on the situation rather than let's talk about something stupid and let's be done. There is a bit of that, and I think Berseria actually faults because of this, because of the tone they're trying to present. Arise doesn't have that as much, but you do have some funny moments. But don't go in expecting something to be super stupid. These characters are just there to have fun, are just there to get their stuff done and go. And the softer moments are kind of quaint and nice and well earned, rather than just being kind of cringeworthy, which it can be the trap sometimes with that. Visuals wise, Arise is just unfair. If you've played Final Fantasy VII Remake, think of that level, if a little bit more stylized into an anime look, but still, the environments are gorgeous. Sure, Tales doesn't have the budget that a Square Enix would. Nobody does. But, I mean, that's the kind of shit you're in for. This is as good a look of the Tales game as I've ever seen, and this is a franchise that, much like Persona, has not really had that level of skill, whether by budget or by effort. So yeah, Tales of Arise is great. So I keep saying it, play it, buy it, get it, like now. And if you need any more convincing, well, this is coming off the heels of what I would consider their best game to that point until Arise showed up, and that is Tales of Berseria. So Tales of Berseria came out in 2016. And you've had Tales games for 25 years. They made a big deal out of it with their announcement bumper on the screen for our eyes, but to me, Tales was always one of those things where I liked it to a point, but never got into it. And whether it was the game mechanics, which I played Star Ocean 3. So that was my knowledge base. I know Star Ocean is not as good a franchise as Tales, and it to some extent ripped them off. But I was always a fan of Star Ocean 3 at the very least, if nothing else. And when I kept hearing about Tales in general as a franchise, it kind of struck me when I was looking back, and I didn't really play a whole bunch. I played one of the games called Tales of Fantasia. That was their first one on the SNES, and I enjoyed it. But I didn't really get into the franchise. People have played stuff like Tales of Symphonia or Tales of Berseria, and I tried looking at those, and I was less than impressed. And it could just be because either the gameplay style or the character style never meshed with me very well. Because older Tales games had a line mechanic, and you would run in a line and you would do some damage, or you do a little bit of free roaming, and then you would still kind of, it would be like your character is kind of shunted in a line, and that never worked. Or the characters would be a bit too goofy, or the storyline would be a bit too goofy, or it would just seem very low rent visuals wise. And again, this is coming from a person who's played Persona or East. This is what I'm talking about. A generation behind what you would consider current level graphics, right? That's where, those lower level JRPG franchises go. And that's not a knock on them. That is simply just due to budgets. That's what they were. Tales never, to me, hit me until Tales of Berseria. And I will stress this over and over and over. And this is something that I do with podcasts, is I will reiterate myself quite a bit. This game is about the characters. Rise has a lot of stuff going for it, but they do not have nearly as interesting characters as Berseria does. Berseria is all about the characters. And if I'm being honest, 1 to 2 or even 3. But that character is so strong and so interesting. It is just what hooked me. Because what Tales of Berseria does is it takes away I'm the hero of the realm and I'm going to save the world and I'm going to do that. And even Arise does this a little bit. But Tales of Berseria starts off on a high character-wise. And hills and valleys here and there, depending on what the story has you do. But if you are not grabbed by the initial character motivation, this game is not for you. If you're not grabbed by some of the things that Velvet does, this game is not for you. This game is an exercise in what an anti-hero can get away with and do when she is pressed to the brink. And I use that term loosely, anti-hero, because outside of maybe 2 or 3 people in this entire game, nobody's good. I will reiterate that, of course. Nobody in this game is a good person because they are a good person. There are probably 2, maybe 3, if I'm stretching it. This game is good because you get to play villains, but more in that, like, they know they're assholes. So I've used this term 50 Shades of Asshole and to describe almost all of them. And I will take a lot of time talking about the story and the characters because that is what really drives home this game. A lot of the other aspects of the game don't live up to snuff, but the story and the characters is just, as long as you have that, usually you can get away with a lot. And Berseria will test your patience in some ways. There are some issues with the game for sure. But I'm going to focus on talking about the plot, which the plot as it is isn't anything you haven't seen before, maybe. But the way that the characters are focused upon and how they interact with each other is a different story. And everything else about the combat or the visuals or the music kind of take a back seat, which is unfortunate. Berseria, I don't know if it was the most popular, but I think it did recently just cross 2 million copies because of, again, it's a really popular franchise. You know, third or fourth or fifth highest CRPG franchise total, tales wise, versus say stuff like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or Kingdom Hearts, you know, that sort of thing. Berseria was not. I think it's more of a critical success because it's coming off of some games that were not critical successes. So they're on a high right now because these last two games have been so well regarded. So sometimes that's what you get. You get sales based on the thing that came before it rather than the thing that came out. You know, that's kind of how movie sequels work. Let's see. As far as plot, really it boils down to the main characters, and I will weave in plot threads and spoilers where I can, but I do want to spend the majority of the time talking about the character of Velvet Crow, because nothing in this game goes without her. If you're not into her character, or if you find her annoying, or you don't understand why she's doing what she's doing, then this may not be the game for you. But Velvet was 15, 16, so 16 going on 19, because there's a time skip in the game, but there's a good reason for that time skip. So from here on out, assume there are spoilers. Because when I'm talking about a character, I'm going to talk about what goes on with them, specifically Velvet for sure. Because Velvet is the pendulum. And when we start the game, Velvet, she's voiced by Christina V, who's been in tons and tons of games, anime, and even does a lot of singing on the side for stuff on YouTube and such. People who ever watched Konosuba would know her as Darkness, and they are two very different characters. So Velvet has taken care of her brother, Laphicet, voiced by Abby Trott. So Laphicet is sickly. He knows he has a disease. They know he has a disease, and they're trying to live their lives. You know, it's a weird thing. I've never been in that situation, but I can really gravitate to it still, because how do you handle dealing with a sibling who is bedridden? You know, that's a scary thought. So Velvet and Laphicet are kind of joined with not a brother, but an adopted brother of sorts, known as Artorias Colbrand, voiced by Ray Chase, who was Noctis in Final Fantasy 15. And he's also the main character of Arise, Alphen. So Artorias is kind of their protector, because he's a member of what is known as the Exorcists, and an Exorcist Praetor. So that's the highest level of Exorcist you can get, so they're not people to fuck with. So he's part of the Abbey, and the three of them kind of go about their merry ways. But something happens, an awakening of sorts. Demons come out of this like giant fuck-off hole in this village that they're living in, the village of a ball. And through weird reasonings that the game will go on and explain later on, Laphicet is stabbed by Artorias and thrown, just chucked into the hole with the demon. Velvet goes after him and then falls in, and then what ends up happening is she becomes what is known as a Therian. She's thrown in prison on a prison island known as Titania with all manner of bad things, but she is left in a solitary confinement, and her food consists of demons, because she has the power to absorb demons and humans alike. And she's not happy about it. She is not happy about it at all, nor should she be. And she spends the entire game pissed off. This is a revenge narrative. So all the stuff about, religion and whatever and demons and Malachim, and it's a revenge narrative. When it comes down to it, you can throw away all that religious bullshit because that's the main plot. Sure, they throw you a lot of stuff, but all you need to know to be hooked into this game or not be hooked into this game is, do you want to see this bitch kick the shit out of this guy? Because that's what her character is. She does not give two shits about anything else other than, how do I get to a thing? How do I kill the thing? How do I use people to kill the thing? How do I use people to stop for other people from stopping me from killing the thing? That sort of thing. So yes, you have religious significance and whatever from the Abbey and Exorcist, but it boils down to Velvet wants to kill Artorias because he stabbed her. He stabbed her brother. I mean, you don't need any more than that. To add to that, somebody actually breaks her out of prison. That being known as Ceres, who was voiced by Monica Rial, who's been kind of like a top 3 or 5 Funimation voice actress for, 20, 25 years. I don't think she does a lot of video games, though, so she's mostly known for doing stuff for ADV, Funimation, Sentai Filmworks, the works, basically. If you've seen any of Funimation or ADV, you've probably heard her do voices here and there. So she does a couple of voices in this game, most notably Ceres. And Ceres basically just says, I'm going to let you out, but I also need you to kill me. Ceres was going to basically guide Artorias or be at his side, right? Because they have these things known as Malachim. So they're not humans, they're not angels, they're kind of like half and half kind of thing. And they have a lot of power in and of themselves. So Ceres sacrifices herself so Velvet can get the fuck off the island. And while she does that, she releases a shit ton of people, 2 of which are Rokuro and Magilu. So Rokuro is voiced by Ben Diskin, who is in the most recent Mega Man game as Mega Man. So it's pretty cool that like I played Mega Man 11 and was like, wow, they have voice acting in this, and it's actually really fucking good. I'm like, that sort of thing. So Mega Man himself doesn't get a whole bunch of lines, right? But that's the guy who voices him. So Rokuro is Samurai Dude. He's a demon, but he's Samurai Dude. So if you've seen any samurai show, you know what samurais are. And he's not like Orin-ish, like the mentor type. He's just Orin if all he was I stab people, I drink. And he's got his own revenge narrative he's going after because his brother is better than he is, so he wants to stab him. So he spends his entire game trying to get stronger or create a better sword so he can stab him. The second fun person that joins Velvet is Magilu. And where do I begin with this? Magilu is voiced by Erica Lindbeck, who, if you've listened to my podcast or watched my channel, you've probably heard her over and over and over. So Erica Lindbeck was Futaba from Persona 5, Jessie from Final Fantasy VII Remake, she's Shion in Tales of Arise, Miriam and Bloodstained, God knows how much stuff she's been in, and it's only been like the past 5 or 10 years, pretty much. But yeah, so Magilu is a mage, and at the time, she doesn't have the power. When she does become a mage, she's not bad. But her whole thing is she acts like a court jester. She's having the time of her life fucking with people. And she's just like, her whole thing is, I'm just having fun. I know what's going on, but you don't know. But I'm joining you guys, but I'm not telling you why. I'm doing my thing, but I'm not telling you what. That sort of like hidden, mysterious, but she's having the time of her life doing it. Not in the Rokuro sense where she's drinking up a storm or nothing. She's just like, I'm watching this shit unfold and I'm having a shit ton of fun. But she does get some serious moments, which is all the more important and impressive because she plays stupid for like 50 hours. But again, it's really fun. She of what comedy there is in the game, she is the reason that it can work, is because she's the levity. She's there to lighten whatever angry mood there is. And some of it is dumb, like trying to join a circus, or these weird like asides where she's talking to like talking to Velvet or talking to other characters and just kind of poking and prodding them, like poking the bear and just fucking with them. Or when she talks to one of the characters and the character's kind of moody and she goes, "MAGIKAZAM!" And there's like, "What the hell was the MAGIKAZAM?" And she's like, "It's a pointless cheer for pointless worry." And it's, what does MAGIKAZAM mean? Nothing. So she gets talked about it, and she's like, it didn't mean shit. But I just wanted to say, MAGIKAZAM! But I can't do it justice because you have to see MAGIKAZAM for itself. It becomes a running gag. I don't even know if Berseria was the first one to do it. But MAGIKAZAM! Alright, I'm done now. Anyway, so Magilu's there to lighten the mood. The next character they get later on, they actually happen upon a ship or two, and they wash up on some very like icy shores and stuff. So they're tasked with finding a guy who's fucking with the local trade commission. So they run afoul of that guy. He tries to fight him. His name is Dial. He loses badly. And their plan, and this is I'm going to throw in plot stuff when I can, because this will show you what's going on with Velvet and her mindset. So, Dial tells them that, well, I got accused of this shit that I didn't really do, but they don't know that I'm not here, and I just don't want to get in trouble. You gotta help me. And so while he's talking, she just chops off his fucking tail, and his tail doesn't grow back for the rest of the game. And he's like, "Why did you fucking do that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can take this to the guy to tell him you're dead, and you can join us later." I was like, I guess. So that happens. So then Rokuro, Magilu, and Velvet run afoul of Teresa and Eleanor. Teresa is voiced by Brina Palencia, who's also a Funimation voice actress. I believe she was in Borderlands as Tiny Tina, but I'd have to look that up again. Eleanor Hume is voiced by Erica Mendez, who was also in Konosuba as Megamine, as in the Explosion Girl. She was Raftalia in Shield Hero, which I did a review about a few weeks ago. And they have with them a couple of Malakim. Well, Teresa does. The idea is that the Malakim are tethered to her to give her power. So they don't have will of their own. So Teresa tries to fight them off and doesn't go too well because Velvet's a pissed off bitch. They end up getting away because they set fire to some drugs in a storehouse. So they basically burned a village to get away. In the time of getting away, Velvet kind of grabs one of the kids, one of the Malakim, and just says, "I order you to set them on fire." So he does, because all he knows is how to take orders. So Teresa and Eleanor get blown away for half a second. That gives him time to escape, and then Velvet just yanks the kid, kidnaps him, and runs on a fucking ship. So in the span of 5 minutes, she's done arson, she's done not murder, but assault, and she's done kidnapping, all in the span of about 15 to 20 minutes in 2 boss fights. You can see where this game's going, right? So they find this Malakim, this 12, 13-year-old kid, basically. And he's no longer tethered to Teresa anymore. So the idea is he becomes one of the few nice characters in the entire game, mostly just by virtue of everybody else being 50 Shades of fuck. Velvet ends up naming him Laphicet after her brother. So this Laphicet, and it's gonna be tough. Most times when I talk about Laphicet, I'm gonna be talking about this character. If I'm gonna be talking about the brother Laphicet, I'll have to make that distinction later on. But this Laphicet is voiced by Amber Connor, and actress I'm not as familiar with, but in this game, this was what I knew her from. But suffice it to say, Laphicet is in that, like, who am I, what am I character, how do I handle this situation? So she has, or he, I keep forgetting, he is kind of that healer mage type, right? So if Magilu is the more offensive mage, Laphicet is the healer mage type. And it's fine, it helps because it fits his character, because everybody else is kind of like, oh, I'm of dubious moral standing. Most of the comedy, again, comes from Magilu trying to fuck with him a little bit, or Rokuro trying to fuck with him a little bit, saying women are evil and blah. You just don't listen to them, Laphicet, or like whatever, or this like push-pull between these characters, like for Laphicet's affection, I guess, because he's that little brother type, that you want to take care of, right? So they go their merry way. They end up running afoul of pirates. So this game has pirates, of course, but I can buy it because there's seas and it's a medieval setting. So the four of them end up having to deal with Eisen. And he's the, I'd say, temporary captain of sorts of the Von Eltia. And he's just this big punch dude. He likes to punch, and he likes to punch, and he likes to punch, and he's good at it. So he's voiced by Taliesin Jaffe, who I believe has been in Critical Role. He's been in a lot of different games and TV and anime and stuff for, like I said, 15 or 20 years. When I talk about voice actors, I talk about them in the span of like 5, 10, 20 years experience. I give dubs a lot more credit than a lot of people do, if you're wondering. Anyway, but Eisen's whole gimmick is that he has bad luck. He has what is known as the Reaper's Curse. And shit hits the fan because there's bad tidings in the sea, or there's 50 million other enemies instead of the 2 or 3 we're going to fight, or somebody loses something. It's just bad luck all around. So his coin can't flip upside. It always shows this bad coin, right? So his whole gimmick is he just punches dudes. He's also a Malakim, and he kind of takes Laphicet under his wing because he's older. They do age, and they do grow old, but not in the same way as humans do. It's probably like the same thing as like maybe they age at half speed or quarter speed or whatever. I don't know the specifics, but they do talk about that a little bit. They talk about how when Artorias threw the brother Laphicet into the hole and it caused the awakening, Malakim became visible to everyone because apparently there was an awakening before in a different sense, and that's more of a plot spoiler, so I'm going to save that till later and maybe not even get around to it, so that there are some spoilers in the game you can get to, just in case you do decide to play it. This one happens at the beginning of the game, so this is not really a super big spoiler, by the way. This is just setting up the plot. The idea is when Brother Laphicet got thrown in the hole, everybody could see what Malakim were. So the people who were being tethered, or just Malakim in general, the general population of humans could take heed of what they were. So Eisen's able to kind of fill in gaps of the story, and some of it has to do with Zestiria. A lot of it you can kind of infer without it. Some people said it was kind of just different names for the same things that would happen in Zestiria, but nobody likes Zestiria, so nobody brings it up. But again, you should take Berseria on its own merits, especially if like you've never played a Tales game before and are just interested in this. I would just go with Berseria. I have not played Zestiria either because everybody tells me I shouldn't. So I'm not going to, unless I have to. So yeah, Eisen takes Laphicet under his wing a little bit, and that takes us, to a couple other places, and they're dealing with the Abbey being Teresa, being Artorias, being others. Rokuro's brother, Shigure, is part of it, and he's just, hey, I'm going to be Shigure's opponent someday, or I'm going to be Rokuro's opponent someday. Watch my big sword, that sort of thing. Teresa has a brother known as Oscar, and how do I put this lightly? Their relationship is incestual, or to the point, she wishes it were. It doesn't go that far, but it is a bit creepy. But it is also one of those things where she's like a half brother or she's not related kind of thing. So she's treating him like a brother. Japan does this a lot. Unless, what was it, 12 minutes? It doesn't go that far, okay? They're not husband and wife or anything like that. But the implication is enough to be kind of gross. Doesn't change the fact that I like Teresa as a character mostly because of her acting, but again, it's like, and then there's another praetor known as Melchior, who's kind of the old dude who does old dude things. He's the Magalu of the party, who's behind everything, sort of, but not really, but kind of is. He stays in the background mostly until he's really needed as part of the plot. So yes, you have your main antagonist, you have your main protagonist, I guess. Your protagonist going away, and then your antagonist party of the Abbey. The idea is the Abbey is cleaning up the messes that demons are creating due to illness, I guess, is what you'd call it, demon blight. People turning into demons, so these exorcists come and stab them. One of the exorcists is Eleanor, who was with Teresa at the time. Later on, Velvet tries to fight Artorias, fails, but Eleanor and the others get sucked into this thing called the Earth Pulse, this kind of like alternate dimension kind of thing. And so it's kind of like the live stream of Final Fantasy VII kind of thing. And they pop out in a different part of the world, and Eleanor is kind of torn between her conviction as the main character is being a total bitch to everything and doesn't care about anything. So she wants to purify this lady who, fought her to a duel and won because Velvet is a crazy bitch. And so she's tied between her role in the Abbey as not the highest end of exorcist, but pretty damn good, versus how does she handle the uncertainty of all that's going on, because she has some knowledge of what the exorcists are planning, and the game does talk about it. That's kind of the second phase of the game, is what the exorcists are doing alongside of the revenge narrative. So Eleanor is placed in a role fairly similar. If you've seen like Steiner from Final Fantasy IX or Waka from Final Fantasy X, it's that fairly typical, like, they're not all they seem to be, and you have to accept, that sort of role. What helps with Eleanor is the fact that she's placed not as the main character in the land of crazies. So in the land of misfit toys, she stands out because she is the nice one. She is the respectful one. She has the etiquette. She has the manners. And sometimes play for comedy, how naive she is, but how dedicated. The naivete doesn't come across as unearned. It comes as, I was naive, but I still have conviction. I still believe in what I'm doing. So I'm going to do everything in my power to try and stay the course, because she's needed as Laphicet's partner. And there's this push-pull between Velvet and Eleanor, because Eleanor is the bastion of goodness. And she's actually my favorite character in the whole party. I like Velvet a lot, story-wise. But as far as characters in the game, though, Eleanor is my favorite. And I used her primarily in my playthrough because I just liked the way that this bastion of goodness is tagging around with this ragtag bunch of dickheads. And again, the game is all about everybody having a shred of evil in them or just plain being dicks. The phrase I remember, which stands to me as what Berseria stands for. So I've remembered this phrase every single time I've played it or watched it. Velvet and Rokuro were walking out of the bar because they were going to help with a drug run or something, or stopping people from doing giving out drugs. So later on, that's what you're doing. You're stopping a drug ring. Oh boy. So Rokuro is walking outside, and he's kind of complaining about something. He's like, well, that person wasn't very nice to us. And Velvet just goes, have we ever been nice? So it just perfectly encapsulates. Velvet is so self-aware that what she's doing is so wrong. And the entire game is just them fucking shit up to get to Artorias and to stop whatever their plan is. Now, I'm not going to go over the rest of that, but that gives you a good sense of like what the characters are, what their motivations are. When I told you about Eleanor and the Abby isn't up to no good, that sort of thing, you might be able to infer what goes on plot-wise, but I don't want to give away the rest of the game. Because, again, that's mostly like first third of the game, right? First third of the game is you get the characters and you get a backing of what's going on. The second or third half of the game, second quarter, I'm getting fractions, numbers, no. So the next part of the game, I'd say a second act, is like chasing a MacGuffin or whatever. They'll tell you what this stuff is. But suffice it to say, stuff goes on and the plot kind of goes here and there in between what the characters are experiencing. So you will obviously be told what to do, how to do it, and where to go. And I appreciate that the game gives you that knowledge base of, we have this for this reason. We're going here for this reason. I'm not a fan of the mid-game because it does kind of drag, but if you get into it for the first third, you're going to stick for the rest of it, I'm sure. I do want to mention Velvet again. Not plot, not specifically, but from a character perspective and from a performance perspective. Later on in the game, let's just say Velvet goes a little nuts. For lack of a better term, let's just say the drive to get revenge is starting to wear on her a little bit, and it goes bad. And my God, just the scenes that she gets when she goes batshit crazy, the scenes that she gets to have, because she has these weird like visions or dreams or like screamy moments or things, and it's just like, God, it's so good. And a lot of that, if you're watching the Japanese version, the Japanese actress would do this. For me, when I was watching the dub, I think Christina V, for me, did really freaking well, because you have this really subdued but angry character, and then all of a sudden, whether it's in battle or it's in the plot, she just screams her fucking head off, and she's this scary, but she's a scary person, but you understand why. And if nothing else, this game is about her and how she processes everything that goes on. Every other character, maybe Laphicet and Eleanor to an extent, but Magilu doesn't do much. Rokuro doesn't do much. Aizen doesn't do much. Really, it's those main three characters, and even then, it's like 70% of this game is Velvet, right? And the others are just along for the ride. So that's really what I could say about the characters-wise, is if you're not interested in Velvet and her story, it's not going to be for you. But it was for me. This is what I wanted this game to be. Because the battle system kind of sucks. It kind of sucks. But again, I will try to process it in my not angry way. I've made it a point to be more positive in these podcasts. When I do get around to Final Fantasy XII, then you'll start hearing me complain a bit more, but that's some other day. But I will start with what the battle system does well. you could get free reign to move how you want. You have these like different skills tied to these different face buttons, and you can just do a bunch of combos, and you can do a lot of damage with these combos. They could be elemental, they could be combos, they can be like damage types, and every enemy has a damage type that they do. So each character has an elemental affinity, or kind of a, maybe not elemental affinity, but a preference to the 2 or 3 elements that they do, or the type of attacks that they do, whether they be magic or not. The battle yo-yos between the characters and the enemies, in the sense that while you're doing damage and when you're doing art moves, you're actually depleting a gauge. And if you do enough damage, you get an extra ball, basically, to, an extra action to do more damage. But if you run out, then the enemy can start doing way more damage and pile on. It's not quite like Bravely Default, because this is a more action-based game rather than a turn-based game, but it's still that yo-yo effect of, do you want to pile on an enemy, or do you want to save up all of your skills and wait it out before you just unload? So you have to be strategic in how you want to employ them. The way the damage works is it's kind of a small circle, and it can get a little frustrating especially in boss fights, to see the circle and see how much damage you're actually doing. Thankfully, they have the HP bar in an analysis. Tales of Arise at least gives the boss bar at the top of the screen with the HP marker. It's way easier to see it. So I think they even understood that that circle around the character, it works to cut down on the display, but it also, like, it's a bit hard to see sometimes. So especially if you're trying to gauge how much damage the boss is going to do, or what skills he has left to do. So the fun thing about Berseria is that it is free roaming. It's one of the few games that allows you to not like run in a line or run on a 2D plane. You do have free reign to move, and that is something that Arise has continued, and I'm grateful for. The main problem with the battle system has to do with their equipment selection, and this is where the negatives will come in. The equipment wants to be Final Fantasy IX. The way Final Fantasy IX did equipment screen was, you take an item, a shirt, a rod, a helmet, a whatever, and certain people would have certain skills tied to their ability screen. So Zidane would learn one thing, while Garnet would learn a different thing, or whatever. Or they could both learn the same thing, but they learned it at different rates. But it was all tied to that one skill. Or maybe separate versions of, different types of weapons would have like 2 or 3 of the same, right? And once you learned it, you learn the ability. Take that concept of gaining abilities as passives, but turning it into this ridiculously like micromanaged degree. Berseria tries to put in this equipment selection thing where you get 50 types of the same armor, or you get 50 types of the same armor +1 or +2, and you equip it. You find out that as long as you haven't had the passive ability, you're still honking this shitty armor that you haven't had for forever. The game is kind of telling you haven't leveled up this ability yet. You got to keep wearing this piece of shit armor until you can move to the next one. So by the time you've bought like the recent armor from a town, you're like, well, I'm still working on this thing. And it's not like Final Fantasy IX, where it was one item did one thing. It was 95 fucking versions of the same equipment doing the same thing. So you had to micromanage and throw away, or help craft one that you were using, or 5 that you were using, or in most cases with most of the characters, all 6 of them could use the same one. So you're constantly keeping this old equipment that makes no sense, and it's just like, I need to build this thing and I don't know how. And it's just like, sometimes it could run the risk of I'm under leveled and under equipped, and the game is telling me I haven't leveled this fucking thing up. So as easy as the battle system is, it can leave you wanting, because the equipment itself is a problem. Another problem for me is the music. You'll notice I haven't talked about the music a lot, and I'm probably not going to. I'm going to talk about one song in particular, the Titanian Island, when Velvet makes her escape. That is the only song I remember. It is a good song. It is a thunderous, like, dun, 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 dun. It's like this heavy metal song. It's very, like, simplistic, but it's got that, like, right vibe to it. For whatever reason, for the rest of the game, I don't even remember. I watched a playthrough of this game again just to like refamiliarize myself with all this stuff, and even then I couldn't be like, I don't care about any of this other music in here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But that also speaks to the level design. And again, it's not that Motoi Sakuraba was a bad musician or something. I liked him in Star Ocean 3, for instance, but something about the music in this game or the design philosophy, this feels like a low budget game because it was. If you're wondering why I talk about Tales of Arise looking so good, it's because this game looks so bad. Character design wise, fantastic. It's got an anime stylized. Everybody looks impressive. Everybody feels impressive. But the backgrounds, the towns, the dungeon design, the stuff in the dungeons don't look very impressive at all. Outside of things looking like walls, there's not really a lot of like detail. Even like late in the game, you go to like a volcano area, and really the only thing telling you that it's a volcano versus a snowy level is that the ground looks a little red. The snow doesn't have a lot of definition to it. And that's probably because this game was initially designed and probably was designed PS3 in mind. So there was going to be that loss of fidelity. But I think after Tales of Zestiria failed to sell, they didn't put a lot of budget into Berseria. Thank God for them that their characters were so good, because everything else surrounding this game was kind of Don't go in expecting some like amazing visual experience. Save that for Tales of Arise, I guarantee you. But characters-wise, Berseria blows it out of the water. I like the characters of Arise, but man, Velvet alone, and that's not even talking Velvet, Eleanor, and Magilu, are so much better. So that's my point, is the characters and what they go through is the drive of this game. So we did the equipment. The characters to a degree, right? Another negative for this game was Aizen, not because of his, like, he's fine. It's everything surrounding Aizen that kind of doesn't work. How do I put this neatly while I get some water? One sec. The best way I can describe it is the character himself is fine, but everything else that surrounds him, his subplot, his backplot, his other stuff, is kind of doesn't work. And it's because they tried to do something special and it didn't pan out. Aizen's whole character revolves around a character from another game known as Zavid, who kind of sits here and there as a kind of side character filling in some gaps here and there, not as a rival per se, but as a similar kind of guy who also knows what Aizen's trying to do. Aizen is trying to find Captain Eifried. Now, who's Captain Eifried, you say? Well, that's a good question, because I don't fucking know. That's the problem. The game builds this guy up as some amazing thing, and maybe he was in Zestiria. I don't know. Maybe this was one of those things, like maybe he was referenced in Zestiria or references something else. And this was that show don't tell mentality. They told you everything about this character. He told you about him. His first mate told you about him. Zavid talks about him. One of the villains talks about him. And then they keep spending times in those skits that Tails does talking about this. Oh my god, this Captain Eifried guy must be so fucking great. It's like saying Sephiroth is great and you only see him for like 5 minutes. That's the vibe I get. That's what I hate about the Aizen situation, is because Aizen, his entire character, rather than revolving around himself and his whole bad luck thing and him being a pirate, and he gets spits here and there, but his motivation is all fucked up because he's trying to find his captain. I get that. I respect that. If I cared about this guy, maybe I would. Maybe he was part of our party and then he got thrown away and then they kidnapped him. No, he was already kidnapped before the game started. It's like, oh, he got transformed into some guy? Well, I wish I'd seen that transformation. It would have mattered some. We have to fight him in a boss fight? Oh, it would have mattered if I had a... They tell you and build you up to believe this character means something when in reality, all he's doing is filling in logic gaps for Aizen's character that don't exist, because pirate, bad luck, pirate, drink, pirate, bad luck. You don't need anything more than, I'm a pirate who has bad luck. Come join my stupid campaign. It's like, he's played super serious, and this Captain Eifried thing takes over his entire identity and doesn't do anything because Eifried himself doesn't do anything. He ends up becoming a side character in the villain's plot thread. And yes, you could claim it was Aizen's not the main character, so it doesn't mean much, but it's still kind of disappointing because I like Aizen and I want to like him. But it's like, I didn't see him. At least with Rokuro, I saw who Shigure was. I saw him kick the shit out of me in 2 fights. I could buy him being a threat because he was part of the fucking story. If you're gonna give me so much fucking dialogue about a character, make it mean something. At least with Sephiroth, you were given like 5 or 6 different instances where he shows up to taunt Cloud and like throw shit at him and stab him or give Genova or what, that sort of thing. It was a tell and show. It was kind of like 40, 60, 50, 50 kind of thing. This was an 80, 20. By the time you hear all this shit about Captain Eifried, you're just like, I don't care anymore. Which also extends to Aizen's subplot, which is he sends these letters to this person who's his sister. And having not played Zestiria, it fell flat for me. If you played Zestiria, it's great, and I'll just give it away so you don't spend, 5 hours doing this or however long it takes you. So you send all these letters and you get all these information. You get these like little like nuggets of information, like these catchphrases or something. And realistically, all it amounts to is a reference. Not a cameo, just a reference. It turns out that he's related to a character in Zestiria. And one of the more popular ones, Edna. But why do I care? I never played that game. Why do you have me spend all this time sending these letters, not even to meet this person? All I did was learn her name as if it was some revelation. So Aizen falls flat. I like him when he's in cutscenes. Whenever they talk about Eifried or Edna or me having to care, it really bothered me. So, it's not the main character. He's probably the least important character in the game, in your party. Sure. It's just disappointing, though. That's all I'm going to say. But, and this is a big but, watch me get in trouble for saying that, but I won't get in trouble for saying this. I've been nice up until now. Sort of. But you know how I mentioned comedy in this game? Yeah. This game does not do comedy very well. When it does do comedy, it's mostly situational because Magilu's fucking with people and saying, MAGIKAZAM! Or Velvet and others are referencing things they've done. Like, here's an instance, here's where comedy works. They go to Logres, which is the capital city of the Abbey, and they meet the head priest, or one of the priests there, and he's, confess, sinner! I will absolve you of your sins. And each character gets to talk about their stuff. So Velvet talks about, she killed she watched her brother get murdered, and she's set fire to the town, or she's done this, or she's kidnapped a boy, or whatever, and he's just staring at her, and it's like, get away from me, get away from me, stuff like that. So every character gets their own like side comedy based on who they are, and who it's comedy based on the characters and their experiences and them kind of bouncing off one another, and they just have fun. It's funny because it's a levity, it's breaking the oppressive atmosphere that the game is presenting because of the story. Until Bienfu shows up. And who's Bienfu, you might ask? Well, if anybody's played Persona 4 or played Persona 5, think Teddy or Morgana, but worse. Seriously, that's it. Bienfu is Teddy, but worse. Early on, Magilu can't be in the party because she doesn't have a Malakim tethered to her. Her Malakim is Bienfu, this tiny little cat with these wings and this top hat. And voiced by Monica Rial, much like Ceres was. And I'm not going to blame Monica for it. I'm going to blame the writers for this, because the writers and the directors made this character. They designed this character, and they bet they thought he'd be funny as fuck. Instead, he's not. I will try to do an impression, but it's going to hurt my ears and hurt my soul to do it. But and this is Monica doing the voice. So again, she was probably told to do this. This is not, again, I'm not saying Monica's at fault for this, but every time like Bienfu speaks, you have this clawing, like, well, I know everything you're gonna do, and it's just I just don't want to get in trouble with Miss Maggie. He talks in this like half Gilbert Gottfried, half cat being stepped on by a bulldozer kind of voice, right? And again, it's not the actress's fault, but then she, like, when the game processes, oh hey, have some fun time talking to Bienfu about like some magazines that he read as a child, or Miss Magilu put me in a dryer once, or something. It's forced. It's very forced comedy that doesn't work, and it detracts from the whole game whenever Bienfu speaks. Thankfully, it's mostly in skits that you can avoid in most cases. I'd say like 3 or 4 out of maybe 50, if that, you can just care about. If Bienfu isn't in the actual cutscenes, you can safely skip them. Bien, and she says it that way. So if that didn't annoy you yet, I would skip it. So yeah, I'm sorry. Bienfu sucks. She's not the least favorite character I've ever dealt with, but one of my top 3. And it was bad. So the comedy in this game sucks. And to make it worse is you have this character who acts as kind of like this traveling merchant, and it's a turtle, or it's a dude in a turtle shell. These guys in these white turtle shells, they're downtrodden merchant dudes, and they talk in these like weird New York accents, and it's just like, I'm a turtle, and I'm like, what the fuck? No, just no. So yeah, no. Anyway, let's get back to the good stuff, shall we? Velvet, many other characters. The story is very serious, and I've been over that. The other thing I do want to mention before is the characters and the actors beyond them. I said before that Monica Rial was in Funimation for 15 to 20 years, right? Brina Palencia, who did Teresa, she's been in like same thing. She's been in Funimation and other shows for 15 or 20 years, right? These are people that I know and like a lot. And when I heard them in this game, I was kind of shocked, because they don't do a lot of video games, to be honest. They might do like 2 or 3 here and there, but I don't see them get Because they're so tied to Funimation, they're usually based out of Texas, right, rather than LA. So I was kind of shocked that they were tasked with mostly main characters, because Monica is not only voices Bienfu, who's around for a lot of the game. You have her voicing Ceres, and Celica, who is Celica is Velvet's sister, so she plays a unique role, and all three of those characters are all different, and she has to voice them differently. Brina plays Teresa really well. Brina is a really good voice actress. You got Chris Kaysen, who is Dial, Chris Kaysen was the guy who played Gluttony in Full Metal Alchemist. So imagine having that guy as a crocodile, though obviously not nearly as like weird, but that sort of thing. You have those actors, and then Ian Sinclair, who is also, a main level Funimation voice actor. I've heard these people in, like, I don't know, some cases hundreds of shows. Others I've heard them like 20, 30, 40 times. I know them by name, and again, that's a thing that I do, and it may not mean anything to you. But I'm one of those people that if I know a certain actor is doing a certain role, it gives me an extra expectation that I know that this character is going to be important, that I know that the role that they were given is probably going to be very good, or at least it's going to be something I can listen to. Bienfu, that was the character's fault. That was the writing's fault. I'm not going to blame Monica on that, because in the rest of the game, she plays Ceres and Celica like magic. Teresa gets a lot of like dialogue. Brina plays her like magic. It's just, I can't stress enough how much an actor's performance can change a role. And if you know a character, or if you know an actor behind a character, it can actually give you that, oh, I don't have to worry about this because I already know what my expectation is. It can work in reverse if you have an actor you're not familiar with, but to me, it gives me that, oh, okay, I'm into this. Tales of Berseria, I had so many different actors that I already knew going in. When I've heard them the first time, I was like, yeah, I know this. I'm going to enjoy this game. And that, when I'm getting back to it, this game has its faults. I don't want to stress the faults too much, because Tales of Berseria and Tales of Arise both have many good things going for it. I'd still say that unless it really shits the bed, Arise is going to be better. So I would certainly go in to play it, but there is no reason you shouldn't play Tales of Berseria either. The way they frame the narrative around antagonistic bad people, I guess, anti-heroes, the have we ever been nice vibe, is magical, because you don't get that a lot. It works because Berseria is the one to do that. Arise, to a certain extent, has characters that are downtrodden, grounded, and but they're nowhere nearly as just forceful with it. The plot and the characters and what goes on around this game supersedes some of the issues with the characters, the acting, or the plot, or the dungeon design. So if you can get past some of the audio-visual elements that are present, and just get invested in the characters, Tales of Berseria is going to be a hell of a ride, and I would highly recommend it to anybody playing it. But that'll do it for me today. As I said before, I'm going to get through Tales of Arise, and I'm going to probably review that at some point. Maybe not immediately, but I'll get to that at some other day. And I'm really happy that I got to do this game while the Tales fervor was going on. It gets me in that right mindset, because now I just want to play Tales of Arise even more. But schedule-wise, next week is Land of the Lustrous, so another anime review. Very distinct visual design and cool story. After that will be Super Mario RPG. Next anime in a few weeks will be Big O. So that'll be an old school watch for me. I love that show quite a bit. And then a few weeks from now will be a review of my time going to MetaCon. MetaCon is the first anime convention or comic convention, what have you. It's mostly anime convention still, the first convention in Minneapolis since COVID began. I'm already set to go. I've got the vacation set, and all I have to do is go up the road. It's in Minneapolis, so I'm really fucking thrilled about it. So I will do a review of that, mostly as a primer for people who may or may not be able to go or are interested in conventions but never went to them, what they'd experience, what they think about. So I'll do my best to kind of like give myself notes and stuff while I'm there so that I can like talk about it the week after, so people are like, oh, cool, a convention would be an awesome thing to go to, especially since COVID. This is the first one that's not going to be virtual or streamed live. This is going to be in person. So I'm super excited. But that's for next month. But for now, I'm going to call it a day. It's been a good, lively hour, and hopefully people have enjoyed it. But I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.